One understands well the mood of the retired and praying monk who lives only to return to God. Knowing about the cosmic argon ocean, one has a better understanding of and feeling for the essentially ascetic nature of all major religious systems. Nothing matters. Yet there lives and thrives in us a thirst for knowledge stronger than any philosophical thought, be it life positive or life negative. This burning urge to know can be felt like a stretching out of our senses beyond the material framework of our body, enabling us to understand what is rational in the metaphysical view of existence. We yearn to know and to know better and with more certainty all the time, to pick up what those before us have learned, and to transmit it with our own small insights to the next and the following generations. We feel, in spite of all the so whats and it does not matters, that we could not stop yearning for knowledge. We feel that we are tools of this yearning to know, as babies and puppies are tools of their plasmatic movements no matter whether or not there is sense and meaning in these movements. Seen from the bioenergetic standpoint, the human longing for knowledge obtains concrete meaning with regard to cosmic events. The quest for knowledge expresses desperate attempts, at times, on the part of the argon energy within the living organism to comprehend itself, to become conscious of itself. And in understanding its own ways and means of being, it learns to understand the cosmic argon energy ocean that surrounds the surging and searching emotions. Here we touch upon the greatest riddle of life, the function of self-perception and self-awareness. Point 1. This riddle is shrouded in awe, at times it results in frightened amazement, even complete confusion and disintegration of the searching ego, as in schizophrenia. All striving for perfection appears in this light as striving for the most complete integration of one's emotions and intellect, in other words, it is striving for the largest measure of bioenergy flow without blockings and deterring splits of self-perception. Therefore, the emotional merging in the genital embrace, pornography excluded, with unimpeded flowing of bioenergy, is most longed for and gratifying, as well as most beautiful in the aesthetic sense. In this light, and only in this, striving for perfecting knowledge has cosmic meaning. In penetrating to the greatest depth and the fullest extent of emotional integration of the self, we not only experience and feel, we also learn to understand, if only dimly, the meaning and functioning of the cosmic argon ocean, of which we are a tiny part. Since the self is only a bit of organized cosmic argon energy, this full self-awareness is, seen from a deeper perspective, a step in the functional development of the cosmic argon energy itself. Life energy has been defined as cosmic argon energy, streaming within a membranous system. From this basic functioning all other and higher functions of the living system, including the intellect and the faculty of reasoning, emerge. Basically, the function of reasoning is not opposed or contradictory to the streaming of bioenergetic current. There is ample evidence in the biographies of great explorers, philosophers, and religious pioneers that their original reasoning grew out of experiencing their own life functions as cosmic events. And justly so. Thus, in an ultimate sense, in self-awareness and in the striving for the perfection of knowledge and full integration of one's biofunctions, the cosmic argon energy becomes aware of itself. In this becoming aware of itself, knowing about itself, growing into consciousness of itself, what is called human destiny is taken out of the realm of mysticism and metaphysics. It becomes a reality of cosmic dimensions, which merges understandably with all great philosophies and religions of and about man. No great poet or writer, no great thinker or artist has ever escaped from this deep and ultimate awareness of being somehow and somewhere rooted in nature at large. And in true religion this was always felt, though never factually comprehended. Until the discovery of the cosmic argon energy, this experience of one's own roots in nature was either mysticized in the form of transpersonal, spiritual images, or ascribed to an unknowable, forever closed realm beyond man's reach. This is what has always turned the quest for knowledge into mystical, irrational, metaphysical, superstitious beliefs. Thus, again everybody is right in some way, only he does not know in what way he is correct. The discovery of the cosmic argon ocean, its realities and concrete physical manifestations such as the flowing of life energy in living organisms, puts an end to the compulsion of turning deeper searching into unreal, mystical experiences. The human animal will slowly get used to the fact that he has discovered his God and can now begin to learn the ways of God in a very practical manner. The human animal may well continue fighting his own full self-awareness for centuries to come. He may well continue to murder one way or another those who threaten his self-imposed blindness by ergonomic disclosures. As a mechanist or chemist, he will most probably defame this truly physical insight as a return to the phlogiston theory or to alchemy, and, as a religious fanatic, he may well feel inclined to regard such a quest for extension of knowledge as a challenge to the greatness of the idea of an unknowable God, as criminal blasphemy. However this may be, the events cannot be reversed any longer. The discovery of the cosmic argon ocean and its bioenergetic functioning is here to stay. Objective, functional logic, and man's reasoning, the chain of events that unfolds during basic natural research, demonstrates the logic of connections between various natural phenomena. The young research scientist experiences the unfolding of the logical chain of events as if there existed such a thing as reason in the universe. This is especially true when mathematical logic enters into the chain of sequences. It is most likely that the first ideas about an absolute world spirit, no matter what you name it, in other words, the beginning of religious thought, emerged from man's capacity to observe and to reason about nature in such a fashion that consistent, objective logic emerged from this activity. We also have good reason to assume that at some time in the historic past the human animal was flabbergasted at this ability to follow logical chains of events that were beyond himself. What we are used to calling objective natural science is the summation of such chains of logical connections beyond ourselves. Now this sounds like mysticism of the first order. The practical, technical business mind and the glibly brilliant intellectual are wont to sneer at such statements. However, they would fail completely in comprehending the fact that abstract mathematical reasoning is able to predict objective natural events. The deeply penetrating processes of basic scientific thought are foreign to them. So are the connections between deep intuition and crystal clear intellectual elaborations of initially intuitive contacts with natural functions. So are, furthermore, such bioenergetic functions as the perfect care mothers give their offspring in the animal kingdom, the rational, logical activities of organs, most of the rational, objectively logical, processes in the growth of plants, the productions of a true musician or painter. To refer to these functions as the actions of an unconscious mind means nothing here. To identify unconscious with irrational is nonsense. The next question is inescapably, whence stems the unconscious mind? And, if all functions below the conscious intellect are irrational, how is it possible that life functioned well, long before the development of reason? There can be no doubt, natural, objective functions are, basically, rational. The objective logic that leads from superimposition in the genital embrace to superimposition in the microcosmic, creation of matter, and in the macrocosmic realms, creation of the ring of the aurora, of hurricanes and galaxies, stunned the discoverer and shook his emotions to their innermost depth. He has rejected the results of this logic for years and refused to believe that the conclusions to be drawn from them could possibly be true. For instance, he balked at admitting that true religion could be so very rational in spite of all its mystical distortions, that there could be such a thing as a rational core of all religious beliefs in an objective rational power governing the universe. But although he did not change his natural scientific position and did not believe that a personified or absolute spirit governed the world, he found, more than ever, confirmation for the conviction that there exists and acts a physical power in the universe at the root of all being, a power, or whatever you may call it, that finally has become accessible to being handled, directed, measured, by man-made tools such as the thermometer, electroscope, telescope, Geiger counter, etc. While the discovery of cosmic argon energy, the primordial creative force in the universe, was a triumph of enormous proportions, its importance hardly had the same emotional and intellectual impact that he experienced in the discovery of the workings of an objective functional logic in the natural functions beyond his personal being. In the midst of his emotional upheaval, he began to understand the absolute necessity of the idea of God among all peoples, whatever their race or whatever their kind of primitive awareness of this logic in nature may have been. It did not matter that the rational, logical chains of events in the universe had been so badly mysticized and personified, or that religious feelings and thought had been misused so often and so cruelly in the interest of secondary drives such as wars, exploitation of human helplessness, and misery, etc. God, at this point, appeared to be the perfectly logical result of man's awareness of the existence of an objective functional logic in the universe. Furthermore, it now appeared quite logical that man had again and again realized, in spite of all distortion and confusion, that somehow this same logic was functioning within himself. Otherwise, how could man possibly have become aware of the logic in nature outside of himself? How could he, furthermore, fail to become aware that he played a double role in the stream of nature, first, in realizing his ability to become actively aware of the logic in nature beyond his own self, and second, in spite of this ability, in being so badly and helplessly subjected to the powerful logic beyond himself, in birth and death, in growth and love, and, above all, in his insuperable drive toward the genital embrace. He must have felt right from the beginning that his genital drive made him lose control and reduced him to a bit of streaming, convulsing protoplasm. Here, the now well-known human orgasm anxiety may well have originated. It is no wonder, then, that most religions which tended toward monotheistic thought condemned the genital embrace through complete denial of all pleasure, as in the Buddhist religion, and by defamation of the genital embrace as lust, as in the later Catholic religion. It is safe to assume that the impelling drive to overcome the basic natural function of the orgastic convulsion that rendered man helpless was later justified by the development of ugly, secondary, perverse, sadistic, cruel drives in man. The first struggles of the founders of many religions were quite obviously directed against these distortions of nature. Since no distinction between primary, natural genital drives and secondary, perverted, cruel, lascivious drives was yet possible, the most essential root of man in nature, his orgastic convulsion, fell prey to suppression, physiological blocking, and, finally, together with the secondary antisocial drives from which the primary drives were not distinguished, to severe condemnation. In this manner, man lost his paradise, orgastic root in nature, and fell prey to sin, sexual perversion. He lost contact with one of his most crucial roots in nature and thus with nature itself, not only in the sensory and emotional but also in the intellectual realm. He could neither be in contact with nor understand nature, except in devious, mystical ways or by abstract reasoning. In higher mathematics a few human animals retained a bit of natural contact with logic in objective nature, and they stood out as particular and prominent minds separated from the rest of mankind, which had lost its sense of natural functions. Furthermore, life, God, genitality remained as if forever tabooed, inaccessible, unreachable, whether they were glorified into heaven or condemned into hell. The ambiguity of hell and heaven, God and devil, their mutual interdependence and exchangeability remained a basic characteristic of all moral theology. This sharp antithesis was reflected in many other dichotomies over the millennia, such as nature versus culture, love versus work, etc. Let us not follow this line of sequences further. It has been dealt with on many occasions, in many different contexts of human pathology, sociology, ethnology, in early ergonomy, as well as in many other branches of human knowledge. The only additional piece of insight to be secured in this study is the basic identity between objective logic in nature, as it meets man's senses, and the power of reasoning itself within man. Expressed in terms of our ergonometric, functional language, to repeat, the discoverer of the primordial argon energy, which functions within man, bioenergy, and outside man, cosmic primordial energy, found himself confronted with this functional identity of objective and subjective natural logic. He felt himself a tool of this logic, a very active and faithful tool. He followed it wherever it led him, with awe and a deep sense of responsibility as well as humility. The functional identity of biological and cosmic superimposition was the result of this symphony of outer and inner natural logic. What basic function, then, has the discovery of the cosmic argon energy in the flow of natural development? It is not empty speculation to determine one's place in the stream of natural events. What is specifically meant here is not the fact that man as an animal grew out of the cosmic evolution. The question here is what the process of the discovery of the argon energy flow inside and outside man entails for his place in and his handling of nature. Man is not only rooted in nature, he also perceives, tries to comprehend and use nature. The overcoming of the mystification of nature will be a necessary consequence of the discovery of the primordial dynamics of nature. Is it then too much to say that the discovery of cosmic argon functions within the human animal may well represent a major evolutionary step forward in the direction of a functional unity of the flow of cosmic and intellectual developments, free of contradiction? Human history leaves little doubt that until this discovery man's intellectual activities functioned mainly in opposition to the cosmic energy. Partially, this opposition expressed itself in mystification and personification of the primordial mover and creator. In other respects, it expressed itself in the form of rigid, mechanistic interpretations of nature. This has been especially true in the last 3 centuries, during which the mechanistic, atomic, chemical view grew in opposition to the mystical distortion of nature. In Ether, God, and Devil, an attempt was made to show that the primitive animistic view was closer to natural functioning than the mystical and the mechanistic. The mystical was overcome by the mechanistic, however, it never lost its hold on the minds of the majority of mankind. Both mysticism and mechanistics have failed as systems of thought. Mechanistics had to abdicate during the first half of the century, beginning with the discovery of nuclear radiation and Planck's demonstration of the quantum action at the basis of the universe. The animistic view, and not the mystical, was a forerunner of functional thinking, as expressed most clearly in Kepler's vis animalis that moves the heavens. Argonomy, at first without being aware of it, had picked up the thread that led in a hidden manner from the most primitive perception of nature by ancient man, animaism, toward the establishment of the perfect functional identity between life energy, organismic argon energy, and cosmic argon energy. This identity of the two forms of existence, naturally, is a late development. Before man could ponder nature, he had to exist as an organized tiny part of cosmic argon energy, and before he could exist, he had to develop out of a long series of predecessors. These predecessors, whether they pondered their origin or not, had to develop from very primitive plasmatic, argonautic living beings that doubtless already possessed the ability to perceive and to react to the surrounding argon energy ocean. This is merely a survey, to secure a firmer hold on our basic questions. 1. Why was man the only animal species to develop an armor? 2. Was the armoring of the organism, which clearly is responsible for the mystification as well as mechanization of nature, a mistake of nature? The problem of why man was the only animal species to develop an armor around his living core bothers the ergonomic educator and physician in his daily tasks. He has to remove the armor in sick people and prevent the armoring in children. In this difficult task he not only experiences the terror that strikes when the armor is dissolved, he also suffers from all kinds of dangerous attacks on his work and very existence by people everywhere in his environment. If nothing exists beyond the confines of natural processes, why does the armoring of the human species exist at all, since it contradicts nature in man at every single step and destroys his natural, rich potentialities? This does not seem to make sense. Why did nature make this mistake? Why only in the human species? Why not also in the deer or in the chipmunk? Why just in man? His higher destiny is, clearly, not the answer. The armor has destroyed man's natural decency and his faculties, and has thus precluded higher developments. The 20th century is witness to this fact. Or is the process of armoring in man no mistake of nature at all? Is it possible that the armor came about in some comprehensible, rational manner, notwithstanding its irrational essence and consequences? We know it is mostly socio-economic influences, family structure, cultural ideas on nature versus culture, requirements of civilization, mystical religion, etc., that reproduce the armor in each generation of newborn infants. These infants will, as grown-ups, force their own children to armor, unless the chain is broken somewhere, sometime. The present-day social and cultural reproduction of the armor does not imply that when armoring first began, in the faraway past of the development of man, it was also socio-economic influences that set the armoring process into motion. It seems rather the other way around. The process of armoring, most likely, was there first, and the socio-economic processes that today and throughout written history have reproduced armored man were only the first important results of the biological aberration of man. The emergence of the mystical and mechanistic ways of life from the armoring of the human animal are too clearly expressed and too well studied to be overlooked or neglected any longer. With the breakdown of the armor, the outlook of the human being changes in such a basic and total manner, in the direction of contact and identification with his natural functioning, that there can be no longer any doubt of the relationship between armor and mysticism as well as mechanistics. Still, the question of how the human animal, alone among the animal species, became armored remains with us, unsolved, overshadowing every theoretical and practical step in education, medicine, sociology, natural science, etc. No attempt is made here to solve this problem. It is too involved. The concrete facts that possibly could provide an answer are buried in a much too distant past. Reconstruction of this past is no longer possible. What follows now is more than empty speculation, since it is based on present-day and abundant clinical experience. It is less than a practicable theory, since it does not provide any better hold on the problem. However, it is interesting to follow a certain line of thought, to see where it leads and, finally, to reflect upon one's ability to think and to comprehend such things as the reality of two cosmic argon energy streams that by superimposition produce hurricanes that spin counterclockwise north and clockwise south of the equator. Thus, our curiosity is well justified. The development of argonomy was guided throughout by the logical integration of natural functioning. First, it was functional reasoning about the layering of human character structure that led to the deepest emotions confined in the armor. Second, from the logical, functional peeling off of the armor layers resulted the discovery of the deeply hidden orgastic anxiety and the orgastic convulsion. Third, it was reasoning about the transpersonal and transpsychological nature of the orgasm function that disclosed its bioenergetic nature and the well-known four-beat of the life formula: tension rightward arrow, charge rightward arrow, discharge rightward arrow, relaxation. Fourth, it was functional reasoning again, more and more closely mirroring natural objective functions, that led from the life formula to the bionds or energy vesicles and from there to the discovery of the radiation in bionds, i.e., bioenergy. Fifth, the same red thread of functional thinking led from the energy within living organisms to the same kind of energy outside in the atmosphere and from there further into the universe at large, cosmic argon energy. Sixth, finally, it was again the orgasm function, abstracted into a generally valid natural principle, superimposition, that led to the understanding of the ring of the aurora and from there to the characteristic spin of multi-armed hurricanes and galactic nebulae. The reader may well be aware of the fact that such a sequence could not possibly have been thought out arbitrarily. No human brain and no keen human fantasy could match this factual logic in the abundance of phenomena and interconnections, which yielded their secret to the natural observer who reasoned functionally. This consistency of thought with the chain of the increasingly numerous natural functions that revealed themselves was no less amazing and at times even frightening to the observer who reasoned, than it must be to the reader of argonomic literature covering a period of some 30 years. As the process of functional reasoning gradually unfolded, the observer not only worked out the method of this kind of functional reasoning, he also experienced most vividly his own amazement at his own power of reasoning, which was in such perfect harmony with the natural events thus disclosed. The function of reasoning itself, as part of natural functioning, came to be a major object of consideration. And here are some thoughts about the faculty of reasoning itself. Before there was any life, there was the streaming of cosmic argon energy. When climatic conditions were sufficiently developed on the planet, life began to appear, most likely in the form of primitive plasmatic flakes as reproduced in experiment XX. From these flakes, single-cell organisms developed over the eons. Now cosmic argon energy was flowing not only in the vast galactic spaces but also in tiny bits of membranous matter, caught within membranes and continuing to flow, still in a spiraling fashion, within these membranes, following a closed system of flow. We cannot assume that this tiny bit of streaming protoplasm already had developed the faculty of perceiving itself, although it already possessed the faculty of reacting to outer and inner stimuli. It was excitable, in agreement with the excitability of the argon energy that flows outside the confines of membranes. The confinement of a bit of cosmic argon energy by and within membranes was the first clear differentiation of life from non-life, of organismic from non-living argon energy. This much seems clear, even if it is as yet impossible to say much about the hows and whys of this genetic differentiation. Many years, unimaginable to human thinking, must have passed before this argon energy, flowing within membranes in closed paths like the blood in higher animals, began to develop the faculty of perceiving its own flow, excitation, expansion in pleasure, contraction in anxiety. We now have three streams of energy integrated with one another and emerging from one another: the cosmic flow, the confined flow within membranes, and the first perception of the flowing itself, i.e., argonautic sensation. A worm or snail might well represent the stage of development where sensation was added to objective plasma current. This argonautic sensation is most clearly expressed in the drive to superimposition in the sexual process. Convulsion and discharge of surplus energy are already present. This phase must have lasted an immense period of time until it reached the stage of the higher animals. In a deer or an elephant, objective streaming of energy and sensation of streaming are still united. There is probably as yet no contradiction, no blocking, no wonderment, only pleasure, anxiety, and rage govern the bioenergetic scene. Then man developed. At first, over long stretches of time, he was little more than an animal that had instinctual judgment, with the first argonautic sense of orientation already in operation. There did not yet exist what we call reason thinking. This type of natural functioning must have slowly developed from the exact, sure contact between nature within and nature outside the argonautic system. Whether or not the brain has anything to do with reason thinking, we do not know. The purposeful behavior of animals without a developed brain indicates that life does not require a fully developed brain to function properly. It is probable that reason thinking, in contradistinction to primitive, argonautic reasoning as in all animals, somehow developed with stronger gyration of the brain. Since we generally assume that functioning precedes and induces the structural development of organs, and not the other way around, we must ask what kind of functioning forced the animal brain into a higher or more complicated form of existence. Whatever the answer to this riddle may be, man slowly began to reason beyond his strong argonautic contact and harmony with nature, which heretofore had been sufficient to keep him alive and to develop him further, even into a reasoning being. We know nothing and can know nothing about those distant times when man began to think. It is obviously wrong, however, to assume that thinking is a sharply distinguishing mark between animal and man. The transitions, to judge from natural processes in general, are always and everywhere slow, evolutionary, stretched over immense periods of time. In the process of this development, man must have begun to reason about his own sensations of current and about his ability to perceive himself and to perceive at all. To judge from the studies of the theories of knowledge, nothing can compare with man's amazement at his capacity to feel, to reason, to perceive himself, to think about himself and nature around him. In thinking about his own being and functioning, man turned involuntarily against himself, not in a destructive fashion, but in a manner that may well have been the point of origin of his armoring. In the following way, we know well from schizophrenic processes that an overstrained perception of self-perception necessarily induces a split in the unity of the organism. One part of the organism turns against the rest. The split may be slight and easily vanish again. Or it may be strong and persistent. In the process of this depersonalization, man perceives his currents as an object of attention and not quite as his own. The sensation of bodily currents then appears, even if only in a passing manner, as alien, as coming somehow from beyond. Can we dare to see in this sharp experience of the self the first step toward mystical, transcendental thinking? We cannot tell exactly, but the thought deserves consideration. There is much good reason to assume that in such experiences of the self man somehow became frightened and for the first time in the history of his species began to armor against inner fright and amazement. Just as in the well-known fable, the millipede could not move a leg and became paralyzed when he was asked and started thinking about which leg he puts first and which second, it is quite possible that the turning of reasoning toward itself induced the first emotional blocking in man. It is impossible to say what perpetuated this blocking of emotions and with it the loss of organismic unity and paradise. We know well the consequences of the blocking of emotional, involuntary activity. It immobilizes the organism and disturbs the integration of all biological functions. This may well have occurred when man first turned his attention upon himself. From here on everything follows by its own inner logic of life negative design, cf. Figure 51. The conclusion following from these thoughts is clear: in attempting to understand himself and the streaming of his own energy, man interfered with it, and in doing so, began to armor and thus to deviate from nature. The first split into a mystical alienation from himself, his core, and a mechanical order of existence instead of the organic, involuntary, bioenergetic self-regulation, followed with compulsive force. In the brief sentence cogito, ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, the conclusion of one's personal existence follows from the statement of the ability to think. The fright that still overcomes man in our time when he thinks about himself, the general reluctance to think at all, the whole function of repression of emotional functions of the self, the powerful force with which man resists knowledge about himself, the fact that for millennia he investigated the stars but not his own emotions, the panic that grips the witness of ergonomic investigations at the core of man's existence, the fervent ardor with which every religion defends the unreachability and unknowability of God, which clearly represents nature within man. All these and many other facts speak a clear language regarding the terror that is connected with the deep experience of the self. To stand aside, entirely logical and dryly intellectual, and observe your own inner functioning amounts to a splitting of the unitary system that only very few seem to bear without deep upset. And the few who, far from being frightened, enjoy submerging in their innermost selves are the great artists, poets, scientists, and philosophers who create from the depths of their free-flowing contact with nature inside and outside themselves, in higher, abstract mathematics no less than in poetry or music. Are they now exceptions to the rule or the original rule itself? Is the majority of the human species the exception in the sense that it deviated from its unity with the natural argon energy flow, whereas the few did not? It is perfectly clear that the basic answer to the misery of man depends on the answer to this question. For, if the majority represents what is natural and the few are the exceptions from the normal, as so many want us to believe, then there is no hope of ever overcoming the split in the cultural setup, the wars emerging from this split, the splitting of character structures, the hate and universal murder. Then we would have to conclude that all the misery is a natural manifestation of the given, unalterable order of things. If, on the other hand, the majority is the exception from the natural, and the few creators are in agreement with nature, then things would look better. It would become possible, by the most strenuous effort ever made in the history of man, to adjust the majority to the flow of natural processes. Then, if our exposition of the armoring is correct, man could return home to nature and what appears today as exceptional in a very few could become the rule for all. It will be exactly those who suffered most from the deviation who will most strenuously object to the second possibility. Here we encounter the possible effect of the discovery of cosmic argon energy upon further human development in its fullest consequence. The discovery of bioenergy is here to stay. It will be opposed most severely by those who have lost contact with nature to the greatest extent. They will object. They will malign the discovery of life energy in the future as they have done for years in the past. They will defame the discoverer and the workers in the field of argonomy. They will not shy away from any measure to kill the discovery, no matter how devilish the means of killing may be. They will shy away only from one thing, from looking into microscopes or from doing any kind of observation that confirms the existence of an all-pervading cosmic energy and its variant, bioenergy. Fig 51. Sketch depicting man's harmonious, and contradictory, 2, rooting in nature in this process of fighting the discovery of cosmic argon energy, a slow but most effective process of softening up the rigidities in the armored character structures will inevitably take place. The hardest, toughest, and cruelest character structure will be forced to make contact with the basic fact of the existence of a life energy, and thus, for the first time in the history of man, the rigidity in the human structure will begin to crack, to soften, to yield, to cry, to worry, to free life, even if at first in a hostile, murderous manner. The help of medical argonomists will do its share in the softening up process. It is to be expected, furthermore, that as the public discussions of argon energy functions spread over ever-widening areas of the globe, other human problems of existence will come into flux too. They will be subjected to a new type of scrutiny, and many gaps in understanding will be filled by what is already known about the basic cosmic force. The Catholic will have to revise his attitude toward the natural genitality of children and grown-ups. He will learn to distinguish pornography, lust, from the natural embrace, happiness, body. He already has begun to change his viewpoint with regard to the sexuality of children. Government officials will learn through sharp experiences in dangerous situations that man is far more than a zoon-polid icon. He is an animal with emotions that determine the course of history, irrational emotions to boot, which messed up the world in the 20th century. One could even imagine that such rigid politicians as the Russian dictators would feel a softening toward human affairs creep into their frozen bodies. Religion will most probably revise its basic foundations regarding the sharp antithesis of man and nature, and will rediscover the real truth, which has been proclaimed with little factual knowledge or effect by most founders of religion throughout history. Work will enter the social scene as the toughest and most efficient combatant of political irrationalism. Man will learn to work for his life and love and children and friends, and not merely babble about the politics of the day, which are forced upon him by non-working parasites of society. In this manner, the blocking of natural contact with the self and the surrounding world will slowly, possibly over several centuries, diminish, and finally, as the prevention of armoring in the newborn generation succeeds, will completely vanish from the surface of this earth. This is no prophecy. Man, and not fate, is burdened with the full responsibility for the outcome of this process. Notes 3. Organ sensation as a tool of natural research 1. Cf. Reich, Experiment Ergebnis über die elektrische Funktion von Sexualität und Angst, Oslo, 1937. 2 Cf. Argon Energy Bulletin, Volume I, No. 2, 1949. 6 Cosmic Argon Energy and Ether 1. Cf. Communication in Argon Energy Bulletin 1, 1949, pages 10 to 11. 8 Survey on Man's Roots in Nature 1. Elaboration of a lecture given at the Second International Argonomic Convention at Argonon, Rangeley, Maine, on August 26, 1950. 2 Cf. Reich, Argonometric Equations, Argon Energy Bulletin, October, 1950, pages 161 to 183. 9 The Function of Superimposition 1. Cf. Reich, Children of the Future, Report on the Argonomic Infant Research Center, Argon Energy Bulletin, October, 1950, pages 194 to 206. X. The Living Argonome 1. Cf. The Cancer Biopathy 11. Superimposition in Galactic Systems 1. The possibility that the end products of spirals such as ours may be spheroidal galaxies appears to be worth considering. It is proposed only as a working hypothesis. On such a plan, the evolutionary tendency among the galaxies would be from the Magellanic type to the most open spiral, and thence through the other spiral forms, to the elliptical and spherical systems. Recently we have found that spiral arms appear more as condensations in great star fields than as ejections from a central nucleus. The direction of development usually assumed, from compact spheroidal to open spiral, implies the appearance of supergiant stars and star clusters late in the history of a galaxy, an unlikely procedure it seems to me. Galaxies, Blakiston Co., 1943, pages 216 ff. 13. The meaning of R76-1. Cf. Argon Energy Bulletin, October, 1950, Argonometric Equations, General Form, pages 161 to 183. 2. The following is no more than a functional workshop arrangement. 14. The rooting of reason in nature. 1. Cf. The schizophrenic split, character analysis. Bibliography of works by Reich on Argon Energy. 1. Experiment L. Ergebnis über die elektrische Funktion von Sexualität und die Angst. Copenhagen, Sexball Verlag, 1937. 2. Die Bion. Copenhagen, Sexball Verlag, 1938. 3. Communication to the French Académie des Sciences on Bion Experiment No. 6, January, 1937. Ch. 4. 4 Bion Experiments on the Cancer Problem. Rotterdam, Sexball Verlag, 1939. 5. The Discovery of the Argon. Volume 1, The Function of the Orgasm. New York, Farrar, Straus, and Giroux, 1973. 6. The Discovery of the Argon. Volume 2, The Cancer Biopathy. New York, Farrar, Straus, and Giroux, 1973. 7. Argonautic Pulsation, International Journal of Sex Economy and Argon Research, 1944. 8. The Schizophrenic Split, in Character Analysis, 3rd Enlarged Edition. New York, Farrar, Straus, and Giroux, 1972. 9. A Motor Force in Argon Energy, Argon Energy Bulletin, January, 1949. 10. Further Characteristics of Vacuum-Illumination, Argon Energy Bulletin, July, 1949. 11. Public Responsibility in the Early Diagnosis of Cancer, Argon Energy Bulletin, July, 1949. 12. Cosmic Argon Energy and Ether, Argon Energy Bulletin, October, 1949. 13. Ether, God, and Devil. New York, Farrar, Straus, and Giroux, 1973. 14. Argonomic and Chemical Cancer Research. A Brief Comparison, Argon Energy Bulletin, July, 1950. 15. Argonomic Literature ordered from Russia, Argon Energy Bulletin, July, 1950. 16. On Scientific Control, Argon Energy Bulletin, July, 1950. 17. Argonometric Equations, 1 General Form, Argon Energy Bulletin, October, 1950. 18. Meteorological Functions in Argon-Charged Vacuum Tubes, Argon Energy Bulletin, October, 1950. 19. The Argonomic Anti-Nuclear Radiation Project, or Honor, Argon Energy Emergency Bulletin, No. 1, December, 1950. 20. Cancer Cells in Experiment XX, Argon Energy Bulletin, January, 1951. 21. The Anti-Nuclear Radiation Effect of Cosmic Argon Energy, Argon Energy Bulletin, January, 1951. 22. Complete Argonometric Equations, Argon Energy Bulletin, April, 1951. 23. The Storm of November 25th and 26th, 1950, Argon Energy Bulletin, April, 1951. 24. The Leukemia Problem, Approach, Argon Energy Bulletin, April, 1951. 25. The argon energy accumulator, its scientific and medical use. Rangeley, Maine, Argonne Institute Press, 1951. 26. Armoring in a newborn infant, Argon Energy Bulletin, July, 1951. 27. Dowsing as an object of argonomic research, 1946, Argon Energy Bulletin, July, 1951. 28. 3 Experiments, 1939, Argon Energy Bulletin, July, 1951. 29. Wilhelm Reich on the Road to Biogenesis, 1935 to 1939, In People in Trouble. Rangeley, Maine, Argonne Institute Press, 1953. 30. Cosmic Superimposition, Man's Argonautic Roots in Nature. New York, Farrar, Straus, and Giroux, 1973. 31. The Oraner Experiment, First Report, 1947 to 1951, Argon Energy Bulletin, October, 1951. 32. Contact with Space. New York, Core Pilot Press, 1957. Glossary. Argon. Primordial cosmic energy, universally present and demonstrable visually, thermically, electroscopically, and by means of Geiger-Müller counters. In the living organism, biological energy. Discovered by Reich between 1936 and 1940. Argonomy. The natural science of the argon energy, adjective, argonomic. Argonite. The condition of containing argon, the quantity of argon contained. Argonautic. Qualities concerning the argonite of a body or a condition. Anorgonia. The condition of lacking argonite. Argonometry. Quantitative argon research. Argonome. Open, the form of a single spinning wave, viewed laterally. Closed, an argonometric figure obtained by bending an open argonome in the middle and bringing together the ends. Specific form of the living organism. Prototype, egg shape. Characterized by the inequality of the two parts of the longitudinal axis, as distinguished from an ellipse. Index. The index that appeared in the print version of this title does not match the pages in your ebook. Please use the search function on your e-reading device to search for terms of interest. For your reference, the terms that appear in the print index are listed below. American Civil Liberties Union amoeba, and cancer cell, and the emotional behavior of the human animal animaism, rational core of anorgonia armored organism armoring, and purpose, and orgastic impotence, segmental arrangement of Asiatic philosophies Asiatic religions atomic theory aurora borealis, in argonomic research, color of, movement of Bergson, Henry biogenesis biology, realm of Bayes biopathy, energy source of Bruno, Giordano Buchner cancer, cancer biopathy, cancer cell, and T-bodies. And protozoa, research character, human, genital character analysis character structure, mechanistic Christ Christianity Church, Christian Columbus, Christopher Common functioning principle, CPF Copernicus, Copernican system copulation cosmic dust, cosmic realm Coster, Charles de Dante Darwin, Charles Democritus Dostoevsky, Fyodor Einstein, Albert emotional plague empire criticism Engels, Friedrich Engels, Friedrich experiment flakes, plasmatic form, in argonomic functional thinking. Biophysical basic freedom giddiness, Freud, Sigmund functional technique of thinking, see also argonomic functionalism Galileo Goethe gravitational attraction, gravity, argonomic theory of guilt, idea of heat waves, hurricanes, functioning of Husserl Jung, C.G. Kant, and the absolute, critique of pure reason Kepler Kreisel K.R.W., Lametri Lang, Friedrich Albert, history of materialism Lenin liberalism life energy, see also argon energy Malinowski, Bronislaw Marx, Karl Mechanistics. Mechanist, and life negation, definition of, and functionalism metaphysics, metaphysical spiritualism Michelson Morley experiment moral responsibility, conscious Morgan, Lewis mysticism, mystic, and life negation, definition of, structure of Neil, Alexander Neurotic Character Newton Nietzsche, Friedrich, his Critique of Morality Nirvana Principle Northrop, Meeting of East and West Noe, Lecomte du Oedipus Complex Orgasm Anxiety Orgasm Formula Orgasm Function, as Cosmic Function. Orgasm Reflex, Function of Orgastic Convulsion Orgastic Longing Orgastic Plasma Pulsation, and Biogenesis Orgastic Potency, and Mystics Argon Accumulator Argon Biophysics Argon Energy, and Functional Technique of Thinking, Discoverer of, Discovery of, and Kepler, and Concepts of God or Ether, Functions of, Main Characteristic of, Ocean, and Inert Mass, Static Electricity and Solar Energy, Color of, Pulsation of, and Galaxies, Energy Envelope, Metabolism, see also Life Energy Argon. Physics Argon Theory, Difficulty in Understanding the Argon Therapy, and Orgasm Theory, Principle of Argonome, Description of, Processes in Argonometry, and Kepler's Harmonic Law Argonomia Description of, Processes in Argonometry, and Kepler's Harmonic Law Argonomia Argonomic Functionalism, see also Functional Technique of Thinking Argonomic Infant Research Center Argonomic, Reversed, Potential, and Entropy Argonomy Argonautic Sensation Perfection, Idea of Philip Planck, Max Plasmatic Movement, and Emotion Pleasure and Biological Expansion Positivism Primary Drives Primary Emotion Psychoanalysis, Intellect and Unconscious Drive in Psychology, Task for Psychophysical Parallelism Ptolemy Quantum Theory Red Fascism Sadism Saturn, Ring of Schopenhauer Secondary Drives Secondary Emotions Self-Perception, in Schizophrenic Processes Semen Sex Economy, Pornographic Interpretation of Sociology, Realm of Solipsism Spinning Wave, see Chryselwell St. Elmo's Fire Structure, Human Character Analytic Theory of the Observer Superimposition, Kinds of, and Inert Mass Thermodynamics, Second Law of Till-Eulenspiegel Unarmored Organism Unconscious, Realm of the United Nations Unpleasure and Biological Contraction Work Democracy Books by Wilhelm Reich Character Analysis The Function of the Orgasm The Invasion of Compulsory Sex Morality Listen, Little Man. The Mass Psychology of Fascism The Murder of Christ Reich speaks of Freud Selected Writings The Sexual Revolution Copyright 1949, 1951, 1973 by Mary Boyd Higgins as trustee of the Wilhelm Reich Infant Trust Fund Chapters 1 through 4 of Ether, God and Devil and Chapter 4 of Cosmic Superimposition newly translated from the original German, Argonomischer Funktionalismus, TLI, copyright 1972 by Mary Boyd Higgins as trustee of the Wilhelm Reich Infant Trust Fund The first edition of Ether, God and Devil was originally published as Volume 2 of the Annals of the Argonne Institute in 1949 and the first edition of Cosmic Superimposition was published in 1951. All rights reserved. Library of Congress Catalog Card Number 70 to 189,340 published simultaneously in Canada by Doubleday Canada Limited, Toronto EISBN 97814668446.